So our firm Redistricting Partners is working with municipalities across the state, cities, counties, and other local governments on the implementation of the Fair Maps Act, which is an open, transparent redistricting process that is being followed by all cities and counties. So we're really happy to be working with San Jose. The process that the city of San Jose has chosen to use is one that is allowed for under the new state law, in wherein we have a redistricting committee or a commission that is going to be taking community of interest input, looking at the communities within the city, and then putting together redistricting plans that will then be sent to the city for final adoption. The members of the commission are from throughout the city, and these are the names. There's also information on the city's redistricting website. The things I'm going to cover are going to start off with the basics of redistricting, talk about the commission process and the rules, the principles that we'll be using in the redistricting, talk about communities of interest. I'll do a demonstration of the District R mapping tool, and then we'll have an opportunity for a community of interest testimony. I know we already have some people waiting, so hopefully we can get through this presentation so they can have their voice heard. And then we'll talk about the remaining hearing schedule. So first off, the reason that we're doing this work, the reason that we're redistricting is because in order to protect two key constitutional rights, we need to rebalance the districts every 10 years based on the most recent decennial census. The reason we rebalance the two constitutional protections that are at play are, one, the idea of equal representation under the 14th Amendment, the idea that everybody has equal access to their government. And in this sense, equal access to the government means that everybody has a district where they are represented by a council member or a county supervisor or school board member or any other elected body, and that their representative power is equal to everybody else. The second part of it is the idea of one person, one vote. And that is that when you're voting in an election, that your vote is just as powerful as somebody who might live on the other side of town. And to illustrate this, I like to bring up a district where we did redistricting once in 2011, where that agency hadn't redistricted since 1950. And when they redistricted in 1950, they balanced all the districts to be equal. And then 60 years passed. And all of a sudden, they had one district that was 12,000 people and another district that had ballooned to 100,000 people. And so from a representation standpoint, that meant that the people who lived in the 12,000 person district, their voice was 8 times greater than the people in the 100,000 person district. So if you had a problem, a broken streetlight in the 12,000 person district, you had a much better access to the government than if you were, there's a working streetlight, thank you. But you would have a lot better access to your government to get that problem solved in a 12,000 person district. In a 100,000 person district, mathematically, you would have to go get 7 of your friends to have the same power to get your local government to respond to a broken streetlight. The voting aspect can sometimes be a little bit different because in that agency, one district had 10,000 voters, the other district had 70,000 voters. So it isn't always the same, but what we found in Supreme Court cases as recently as about 3 years ago is that when we're to rebalance these districts, the primary goal is rebalancing them for that representative value. So we rebalance districts based on people, and I'll talk about that a little bit. The 10-member commission is going to be doing a series of outreach hearings like this one. They're going to be working to identify community of interest input from the public. That community of interest input is the building blocks of future districts. 20, 30 years ago, the kind of smoke-filled room redistricting would be that the only community of interest that mattered was maybe the addresses of the incumbents or some political consideration or other issues. Now in the way that redistricting is expected to be done and the way the state law requires, we start with building blocks that are all about the communities and the people instead. And then the process of the redistricting commission will be to create redistricting plans as drafts, get public input on those, and then ultimately recommend and pass a map that would go to the city council for adoption. The traditional criteria that we're going to use starts with that relatively equal size. Then the idea is that they don't have to be perfectly equal sized. We want to make sure that we are keeping districts balanced, but if having one district be a little bit larger than the other in order to protect a neighborhood line or to protect a community of interest or to preserve the voting rights of a community, then that percentage of equality of districts can be up to 10%, meaning the biggest district can be up to 10% larger than the smallest district. Districts do need to be contiguous, meaning that districts don't hop and jump. It means the city of San Jose does have some areas that are a little bit less contiguous. And when we look at the actual map later on, you'll see there's some areas where we have either things called islands, which is an area inside the city that's part of an unincorporated area, or we might have a part of the city that's actually detached from the city itself. When we deal with that, we'll talk about things being contiguous. And then if there's something that is actually the city itself not contiguous, we'll try to figure out how it can be made functionally contiguous based on how people travel or other criteria. Maintaining communities of interest is the critical part of the process, like I've said. And it's important to look into this issue a little bit and how we want to hear community of interest testimony. First off, a community of interest is completely subjective. It can be completely subjective. I might say my community of interest is where I go cycling, where I drop my kid off at school, where I work, where I walk my dogs, and that's my community of interest. And my issues might be the street lights and the potholes and the bike path and different things. So what we want to do is be open-ended and inclusive in this process. We don't want to say when people are coming and testify, well, I don't think that is a real community of interest. We want to really try to have open eyes and look at all different types of people's interpretation of what their community of interest is. There are some communities of interest that are covered by the Voting Rights Act, by the Federal Voting Rights Act. Largely in California, it's Latinos, Asians, African Americans, but it can be other nationalities or ethnic groups. In one state we're fortunate to be working in, there are Native American communities of interest. In Alaska, where we're doing some work, it's the Alaskan Native population. So communities of interest that are covered by the Voting Rights Act can be greater than these three categories, but these are the three categories that are most covered in California and be most of issue in within your region. Now, while we will look at these groups as communities of interest and where we might find that your legal counsel tells you or an outside organization tells you that you need to draw districts to protect the Voting Rights Act of these populations. And you might hear people say that we need to draw majority minority districts based on these requirements. While all that's true, we also cannot, also based on the 14th Amendment, or the Equal Protection Clause, we cannot draw districts predominantly based on race. So if a legal guidance is given that we have to create a district that's Latino, Asian, or African American to a certain percentage, we'll do that as is required under the Federal Voting Rights Act. But outside of that, we won't say, oh, we want this district to be the Asian district or the African American district. We're going to make sure that districts are shaped by the communities. Maybe it's the churches that community goes to. Maybe it's the supermarkets that community shops at. Maybe it's the community center that community utilizes. Maybe it's the language services. Maybe it's the bilingual programs. Maybe it's other things that are tied to how that community lives and works and recreates and is connected within the city. There are other communities of interest. I mentioned cultural, religious groups. outdoor recreation, my cycling analogy, downtown or rural or suburban, those are all different types of communities of interest. And there are more and more, as we do these redistrictings, we hear some really amazing stories about people's lives that help define them as communities of interest. Something that communities of interest can't be. It can't be political party affiliation. If somebody is getting on this Zoom right now and they call in and say, well, my community of interest is me and all my libertarian friends, we live on one side of town, we want to be in a district together, that cannot be utilized as a community of interest. Incumbents or candidates cannot be used as communities of interest. If I want to call in and say, I'm going to run for the city council, I want a district that has this, that's my interest, that is not a legitimate community of interest to utilize in the redistricting process. It's also hard to completely utilize as a community of interest any communities that are either citywide or that don't have a geographic location. Somebody calls in and says, I'm left-handed and I can't buy scissors anywhere in the city. That's not really a community of interest because it's not geographically located in one part of the city. When we are encouraging people to contribute to the process through identification of their communities of interest, or when we are listening to testimony and kind of like getting that fine tuning of our listening to the community about their communities of interest, these are the three things that we really want to listen for and that we want to encourage participants to provide. One is, does the community have a shared culture, characteristics, a bond, a name? Is there something you call that community of interest? Is the community geographic in nature? Where does it reside? How can it be identified? Are there geographic tools that can be used to help aid us in the process of, or getting data to be part of the process of identifying that area? And third, what's the community's relationship to the jurisdiction? And how is it affected by the policymaking? One of the more creative ways I've heard of community of interest being discussed was a community of interest is a group that can be harmed by government. And the first time I heard that, it didn't make sense to me as much. But now that I've listened to it a few times and listened to more testimony, it makes sense that if, let's say, you're a community of artists and the city government could very well harm that community of artists by making it harder for them to keep studios open and making it harder for them to have events, making it unsafe in their neighborhoods, and not allowing for the amenities they need in order to thrive, then yeah, they could be harmed by government, and that helps reinforce their claim to be a community of interest. So we want to look at those three things, and we want to hear that, and we want people providing that information in multiple ways, as I'll describe. So here's some examples of potential communities of interest, and we like to do this like as a little game, but on Zoom, I'll just kind of answer these myself. But a group of renters who lives downtown testifies to the city's redistricting commission. Is that a community of interest? Well, I would think that it is, because not only can we easily map renter versus homeowner, it's in the census data, but they also probably share an interest, whether it's, a rent control issue or parking or other issues that are unique to them and different from people who live in single family homes. And that interest is something that is likely determined in part by the city council. A part of town that has a historic nature. So it's either a former hub of business or a community, or it's one that's been discriminated against. I know in this redistricting process, we've already heard somebody from the community talk about redlining. Should that be considered a community of interest? I mean, theoretically, the redlining is stopped. So is that a community of interest still, even though that's a policy that has gone away? And the answer actually is yes. Historical communities and areas with historic discrimination, those scars don't disappear immediately. And the communities oftentimes are still affected by those policies of a century ago or 50 years ago or 20 years ago or 2 years ago. And it should be considered in the process of drawing districts. All too often, we actually see a lot of those communities split in multiple districts in a way that disenfranchises those communities. So a group of dog owners in the suburbs wanted a local park for the dogs and a water fountain. Is that a community of interest? Actually, yes, sounds sometimes trivial, a dog park community of interest, but it is an example of people who maybe need safe streets and need services. And maybe it's a city provided dog park, or maybe it's a county divided dog park and they'll go to the county redistricting. But that can be a community of interest. A statewide group of fans of the Giants. Is that a community of interest? Well, it might be a community of interest, but not really useful in the redistricting process because they probably are citywide. It's unlikely that a jurisdiction would have a lot of say over the Giants. I'm not a sports fan terribly, not a big baseball, football fan, but if a city was bringing the Giants to town and building them a stadium and there was going to be congestion, traffic, noise, and other issues around it, then maybe it would be a community of interest. It's not that a sports facility can't be, it definitely can be, but it needs to have a connection back to the local government. One way we can get these questions answered is using a community of interest form. These are available on the website, and the idea is to get the public to participate in the process by putting down on paper what is their community of interest. And that is a critical part of the redistricting process. And there are certain people who will really enjoy using the online mapping tool. And there are others that maybe aren't so comfortable with using an online mapping tool, or they're not so uncomfortable with testifying in a hearing. And so in those instances, we definitely would want to have people, be able to participate in a, in a way where they fill out a form on the website or something like that. So it really is a way to engage the public and get those three questions answered. So there are options for online map submissions as well. And that is something that is really new in this redistricting process. The redistricting in the past would have some people mapping, but it was almost always the people that were mapping were the people who had, real expertise. They would hire someone like us to draw maps and participate with them in order to give them the ability to, have that public engagement. Nowadays, it's really been democratized. And one of the companies that's been working to democratize it is Districtor. And that is, I'll be going through that. That is the company that is going to be providing the mapping tool for the city. The city website, I've got to go back. I'll have to close this out. The city is using the Districtor program. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch out of using the PowerPoint and switch into using my web page. So if you give me a second here, I will make that change. All righty. So this is the San Jose mapping tool for identifying communities of interest. This page gives information about how to do it, and this red box here allows you to select the tool to draw your community of interest. Once you get here, you can see the entire sphere of influence area for the city of San Jose, and you can then go ahead and zoom in a little bit to go try to find an area that you want to draw a community of interest. You have tools up here. This hand tool allows you to move around. This painting tool allows you to paint an area that you want to have be your community of interest. And then this tool actually allows you to go real fine tune with like a really narrow brush, with just picking up like one census block at a time, or going really big and picking up a whole area, big area at a time. So what you can do with this tool is you can identify an area like this, and then you can name it. And I'm going to name this training 1. And you can put information about that community of interest, and it's as easy as that. I can also create a place. I can click on the new place location, and I can put a new place dot. And then when I put that dot, I can name it something. And I can describe that. All that information that I have there, I can go ahead and click this now, and I could save it. And once I've saved it, I now have a link that I can copy and send to friends. Do that again. I have a link, or I can share it to the gallery. And I'll show you what happens when you share it to the gallery. I'm not going to share this one because we're just testing. I also, one of the things that's interesting about this tool, which I really love, is let's say that this is somebody's community of interest. And they say, but you know what? I actually have multiple communities of interest. This is my community of interest of where I live and I work and I play. But honestly, like I said earlier, I'm a cyclist, and I've got real concerns about safety and roads and access and people not following the 3-foot rule and police and whatever it is my concerns are. And so I now want to draw a second community of interest. I can click the plus button and I can draw the second community of interest. And it's up here in the foothills where I like to ride. And then I say, actually, you know what? I want to do a third community of interest. And my community of interest here overlaps these others. Now, look, I've created 3 communities of interest, and they all can be looked at. I can give names to all of them. I can describe all of them. And then I could submit and update that and save this list of all these different communities of interest. If I went and copied this to my clipboard, I could actually put this into, an email or something like that and send it around. Now, if people do, as people do create these communities of interest, it'll also create, if they choose, they could just email that link that they did, or they could actually go here and look at other people's communities of interest that they've drawn. So when you draw a community of interest like this, it's public, and they can go look at what somebody else drew as their community of interest. And so saving this allows us to draw this information down. All this information will be put into a common format for the commission and put into a website so that the commission can utilize this as building blocks of the eventual districts. Let me go ahead now and switch back to the PowerPoint just to finish up. So another way people can participate is in person, drawing their maps by hand and identifying that community of interests. And so this online mapping, this community mapping tool has a snapshot of the city with the neighborhoods identified. So people can go in and draw that and then write their community name, and then the description write what their community of interest is. And we have had a great experience with these in areas that are able to use some kind of in-person engagement. And so we're really looking forward to getting these as well. And in the future, we'll have forms like this that'll be printed out. They're pretty big posters like this, printed out with actual population numbers. And those posters with the population numbers, people can actually draw districts, meaning they can add up the number of the population of each district and submit that as their community of interest testimony. We have upcoming meetings that are going to be held. Obviously, right now we're at the 2 p.m. meeting in District 6, but these meetings are being held in order to ensure that we can get out to the whole community and have the opportunity for the community to give outreach. And for more information, definitely check out the city's redistricting website. There's a lot of great content there and multiple ways to engage and be a part of the process.